Hello, everybody, and welcome. It is I, Mr. Moohead, and my crew. Fred Scuttle, Rick, Jake,
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen.
Jake's cat, and Brian joining us up on the
His weekly
program.
cameo. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And for those who are watching, you can watch this on Facebook Live. You can watch it on YouTube Live as well. And it'll be archived in both places. So there's no excuse for you. I see somebody called We Suck Again trying to get into, but they don't have, unfortunately, any devices connected. So, yeah, it's a sad day. But if you don't have a microphone, you don't have a camera, I don't know what the fuck you're doing here. All right. I wanted to start the program out differently, seeing as how we don't have a football game for the Browns this weekend. There are two stories of human interest to me. And some things really disturb me on a personal level. And I wanted to share this one first. And this is a person who wrote in to Cleveland.com. Shame on the Cleveland Browns for not accommodating the young man with Duchenne muscular dystrophy with handicapped seating at the October 13th Browns Seahawks game. WKYC TV quoted Jeffrey Nishinsky saying there were people sitting in handicapped seats who were not handicapped. The young man had to physically be carried to the regular seating area. How can the Browns allow non-handicapped individuals to sit in handicapped seating? This should never happen. All right. So I first want to go to my crew here to get your feelings on this. Rick, you go first.
I remember I saw the headline, but I never read the story, so I wasn't sure what all was going on. But from the sounds of it, somebody on the Browns, security crew or whatever, that somebody dropped the ball, which is nothing new this year with Cleveland. But they should have taken steps and should have corrected this right from the jump. It shouldn't have even gotten to that point.
All right.
Now, my question is: was this a single individual, or was he was he with someone else who was also in the handicap section, who actually needed to be in the handicap section?
According to the story, he and his family came, and people who were able-bodied were sitting in seating areas that were reserved for handicapped people, and that they would not give up the seats, and nobody enforced the handicap seating. So they had to physically carry the young man with muscular dystrophy to other seats to watch the game. Now, I can't tell you, I'm not familiar with Cleveland Browns Stadium, if the handicap seating is a better view seat for the game. I can't answer that. I'm just telling you the story that ran on WKYC TV and comments that were being made about it. Jake, what is your feeling?
Well, I've been to that stadium a few times, and I know for a fact it's like a middle row above the dog pound level, and it has individual seats for people who can manage to get there and sit down, and it has gaps there as well. And a lot of people do stand and just drink their beer right there or hang out around there for a better view, especially towards the middle and end of the fourth quarter when the game is at that point where it's like we're going to sneak out of here and beat traffic. So it does not surprise me, and I feel like it's one of those things I've seen before, but I did not. That issue is very uncommon to have, like that type of medical condition. But yeah, it's not right, and I think the games I've been to, the security just ignores it altogether and does not care. And one of those that week, it was a really bad look.
You know,
it's
and
never right, but it happened that week, and it should never happen. But
Yep.
the fact that it made news in that spot is hopefully wakes them up a little bit.
Now
And
they
Brian?
bought and they bought were able to buy those seats.
Those no. I think those are for people individually who just find the spot there, and they have a certain amount of handicapped accessibility there. And you're not supposed to hang out there. The people who are handicapped can hang out there and figure it out, but it's not a great stadium for that. I will admit that one. It's just like little, like you could pull a wheelchair in type thing, or if somebody needs a cane, they can sit down and be right above the dog pound level, or all around the stadium.
Because like at Glendale, they at the Big Toaster, they do have when you go to order your tickets, they specify handicap section.
Yeah, a lot of it's a hangout. Like at the end of a game or second half of a game, where it's getting bad in Cleveland. Unfortunately, they hang out, just drink, and they sneak out right by the exit and get to their cars. And in this case, there was a reason to report that, and it's never right. And it just happened this week, where this condition was a factor. And I'm glad it's reported because I noticed it earlier when I was at a game last year. So, yeah, it's not good.
So this has been an ongoing deal.
Hi to Rox and hi to Steven. I just want to say hi to the two. Okay,
I mean,
go ahead.
it's one of those things where if you're at a Cavs game as well, I've done it at the end of a game, of a close game, we sneak down and watch from the tunnel and sneak out. It's like that. You know what I mean? You can sneak out, beat traffic, and watch it at the lower level and just get to your car and beat I-90 traffic. So,
Brian, Nick is asking a question. How would you answer that question?
Let me see here. How about the guy that won't give up his seat to the handicap guy? Well, that to me is a usher and security problem.
yeah, security probably should have made that man move and just sit down somewhere or get back to his seat.
Because because the ushers are in charge of who's how you're seated in what rows, and they kind of tell you, and help you get to you. Like if you're in the middle section, there's already people at both ends seated. They'll help you get to your seat, and so they can get to like for us it's VIP security. I don't know who does the Browns security, but those people wear security wears yellow jackets when they're up in the stands, and so you can go to those people and say, "Hey, look, this guy's sitting in like if somebody's sitting in your spot, and you're the one holding the ticket with that seat number and that row number, they can get rid of whoever is there."
Yeah.
All right. Now, I want to expand the this conversation because the story in and of itself is just kind of an eye-raising story. It's the comments on Cleveland.com from people who watched the WKYC TV report and who read this little editorial letter that I just read to you. I'm going to read some of these comments to you. The Browns have bigger problems than having to listen to people whine about this or that. Here's another one. My guess is there wasn't any mention of the ticket holder being handicapped when the ticket was purchased. The ticket would have indicated as much and the seat would have been assigned.
Wow.
All right. Now, I'm going to keep reading these to you, So the Browns should deny 100 people or however many accessible seats exist tickets to the game on the chance that someone with a disability needs them? Did the parents, once they had the tickets, call the Browns to see if they could be exchanged? No. Instead, they show up on game day with 72,000 other people and say, "We're here, accommodate us."
Yep.
Then complain when it can't be done. Maybe a phone call earlier in the week would have been smarter. The headline said the man was denied seating. He was not denied anything. He got exactly what he paid for.
Yep.
And the patron who purchased the seating prior to him had every right.
Sounds like out of every story you hear about, only the Browns would cover a topic like this. No offense.
No, wait a minute. He chose to go to the game. No one made him leave his home that morning. He and whomever chose to go to the regular seating, and they knew that ahead of time.
They had to take a regular seat because that spot was not available.
That's right. There at that point.
He's got what? He's got multiple sclerosis,
Muscular dystrophy.
muscular. Okay, so he has no use of his extremities.
That's correct. Right. I'm not.
Like he can fucking march up and down.
Yeah, I don't get it either. Here's what the next person's saying. Too bad. Look, I'm so tired of everyone thinking they need to cater to the handicapped. Go to a parking lot and 50 spaces are designated for them. The list goes on and on. That's life. Deal with it. I could go on reading these, but it's what I realize about the world that we're living in. And that's that we don't have any feeling for people whatsoever. And that it's inconceivable to me. I mean, I live in Florida, and I can tell you about handicap parking firsthand because it's the badge of honor of every senior who exists in Florida who are not handicapped to get a handicapped parking privilege based on age without really proof of disability. And when you see cars parked in handicapped areas in Florida, you'll see people just walk right in, walk right out of their cars and go to the store. And they're the best. They're the best seats in the house, so to speak. They're the best parking spots next to the stores. And you realize these people aren't handicapped. They're just assholes. And Northeast Ohio is full of assholes. It's one of the reasons why I left.
Mr. Mua, can I add something to that?
Sure.
As somebody who's worked at a grocery store, I can concur with whatever you say. They'll even park in a fire lane next to the front of the store where it says no parking.
Yep.
Fire lane, and they will park their car and put the flashing lights on and go in. And you never know if there's an emergency vehicle that needs to go there. Like if somebody passed out or had a heart attack, an ambulance got to park there. It could be that one time. And also another thing they do is we have the doom buggies in the store where the people who can't walk because either they're really overweight or they have some sort of medical disability that prohibits them from like long lengths of walking or standing. They sit in these electric carts and it rides around the store. So I'm sure you guys know what I'm talking about. And there's people like kids or even people that clearly don't need it, but they will sit on it and ride it along the store. And I've had handicapped people come in and say, hey, you don't have any doom buggies in the front area. And I'm like, yeah, that's because those dickheads who didn't need it were joyriding on it. And it's embarrassing, you know?
I think you also have to be careful with just looking at someone and judging. I had a handicap placard before because I had a pulmonary condition and could barely walk for distances. So I had a placard. Looking at me, you wouldn't have been able to tell that there was anything wrong with me. So there are a lot of people out there where if you just look at them, you won't know, but they really do need that placard or they need to park up front.
No, and the thing is, I can tell you that my father lives here, and 10 years ago, he got himself a handicapped parking, and there was nothing wrong with the man at all. And I said, what are you doing? And he goes, oh, that's what everyone does. That's the first thing you do. I mean, when you're older, you get a handicap parking permit. And it's like, this is, and it is unfortunate because people who are legitimately, and it isn't necessarily like Rox points out, a permanent disability. I mean, if you're physically unable to get from a vehicle into a store, or you are really burdened in a way, then I'm all for it. That's what those things are there for. But it seems that people are exploiting this, and they're also exploiting seating at Cleveland Browns Stadium. And the amazing thing is that the able-bodied people who stole a seat that they didn't belong in are the people who are getting supported by the people who are writing in. Yeah. There's another story that goes kind of hand in hand with this. Everybody knows, if you watch the program, that a cow is very much, very much into the sport of boxing. and a lot of I've seen so many fights and so many outcomes of fights in my life. And this weekend there was a really bad one. Patrick Day, a fighter who was 27 years old, fought a guy named Cornwell, who was an undefeated fighter, and was killed in the ring on DAZN. DAZN is the streaming arm of Aram Promotions, and it's a sad thing. I watched the knockout. I wanted to see with my own eyes, not out of morbid curiosity, but I knew that there would be more of a story than this. And the thing that tipped me off is when you would go to the ESPN page and all of the boxing pages, they only literally listed Patrick Day's last 3 fights. It's like, well, who did he fight before that? And his record was 17-4-1 with 6 knockouts. All right. And was he a great fighter? No, but he was quite a credible fighter. And he kind of hung in there against Cornwell. He was not winning. He was not close to winning the fight. But you can't stop a fight until a guy gets hurt. He was hurt in the 9th round. In the 10th round, he was really seriously staggered and was stumbling around the ring and got hit with a big left hook. The result was that his head hit the canvas and his eyes rolled back in his head. It was a horrifying thing to watch. And, you know, people are just willing to give the sport of boxing a pass because it's just one of those things that can happen in a cruel and violent sport. We hear the same thing about football, too, that it's a horrible thing, CTE. But, you know, it's part of this game that we all love. And that's what Max Kellerman said on television today. He is, of course, a longtime boxing guy, commentator, that this is part of the game of boxing. You know, it's the dark side of the game that we love.
Mr. Muhead, this was the second fighter that died in the ring this year alone. I haven't heard any stories about this. I mean, I've seen it over a period of time with the CTE and the dementia and all that stuff, but I've never heard of it, just guys just dropping like this.
Well, you know, here's the deal. Somebody made a comment on Twitter after somebody was bringing my name up because of the tragedies in MMA and also in boxing. And they referenced the Ray Mancini Dooku Kim fight, which I think most people who are not really fans of boxing, everybody knows that Dooku Kim, the Korean guy, was killed in the ring in a fight with Ray Mancini. Years ago, I had Ray on the air. Ray and I talked about it. It's never easy to talk about subjects like that. And Ray was very gracious to give of his time and talk about it. But the story with Dooku Kim, and I think it's necessary for people who are young, and if you see the fight, he was a very courageous fighter, and he just, after the fight, he collapsed. And it was just said that, you know, just the wear and tear of the Mancini fight killed him, and it couldn't be further from the truth. They lied about his record, Dooku Kim's record, going into, the fight with Ray Mancini was listed as a pretty credible record, but it didn't account for the over 100 fights that he had in South Korea as being a member of what they called boxing clubs in South Korea. And he had been in well over 100 fights. And the damage that he incurred happened over the lifetime of his stint as a club fighter in Korea. And Dooku Kim was not a household name in Korea or in the United States, but he was the opponent that Ray had to fight because the commissions dictate who you have to fight. When I saw that they weren't listing Patrick Day's previous fights, I decided to look at a few things to see, first of all, who he was. 2015, he was an Olympic finalist. He didn't get into the Olympics. He did have some skills. He won early fights. Most of his 6 knockouts that he knocked guys out happened very early in his career when he was fighting people who were lower level fighters. As he moved up, he didn't carry power with him. So I have, the first thing I did is I just started looking at his record. And what was of interest to me, there are so many stories in boxing. As a historian, I can tell you that guys who die in the ring, it's usually just who they happen to be in the ring with. Like Dooku Kim just happened to be in the ring with Ray Mancini. Patrick Day just happened to be in the ring with Cornwell. I decided to look at how did this fight get matched up, and the answer was Patrick Day fought a guy named Carlos Adames. And Carlos Adames was another contender type fighter. I decided to look up a review of the fight it was eyewitnessed by Keith Idek from BoxingScene.com, a site that I trust. It was an ESPN televised fight, and Adames won the fight. I want to read to you what his eyes saw in the fight. Adames almost knocked out Day late in the 10th round, but the courageous Day did everything in his power to withstand the onslaught and finish the fight on his feet. A devastating right hand by Adames started the trouble with 50 seconds left in the fight. Sensing Day was ready to go, Adames landed one power punch after another as Day stumbled around the ring. A right hand Adames landed just as the final bell sounded seemed to really hurt Day. He also knocked Day into the ropes with 55 seconds to go in the 9th round and hammered Day with several more power punches thereafter. But he couldn't finish off a seemingly dazed Day. Another straight right hand in the 8th round snapped Day's head back. Day's overhand right connected with 25 seconds to go in the 8th, but Adames shook his head to indicate that it didn't faze him. When I saw the fight, I saw Day was stumbling around the ring and this time got finished off with a left hook and died. He didn't die very much later. He was convulsing in the ring after the fight, and it was a very tragic scene. I believe that the fight before this affected Day as much as the fight that he was in. And here's the inhumane part of boxing. When you get knocked out, 2 things happen. 1, you get concussed, and it's dangerous. And 2, the boxing world takes note of a fighter who gets knocked out, but who has a credible record, like 17-3-1 going into the fight. So you get paired up again, but you're getting paired up against up-and-coming fighters. Adames was an undefeated 18-0 fighter. Cornwell, another undefeated fighter with a big punch, 18-0, 14 knockouts. And those are the fights you get when you're no longer able to win at even the mediocre level of fighting. To stay alive, you become the appointed opponent, or also known as the walkover or the easy win. In sports, as the Cleveland Browns can attest, if you get the Seattle Seahawks as an opponent, you have a tough game. But if you get the New York Jets as an opponent, you get an easier game. the ebb and flow of professional sports, whether it's baseball, where the Indians get to play in their division that is incredibly weak, or, well, wasn't this year with the Twins, but historically has been. But playing the Tigers was certainly good for the Indians. To whether it's football and being in a very
how many years were the Royals bad?
Yeah,
Everybody took advantage.
That's right. So,
Pittsburgh was bad for 22 years.
But you also have to go on the West Coast trip in baseball, and you got to face some pretty damn good teams. And, the same thing's true with the NBA. There are going to be a lot of teams that play the Cleveland Cavaliers this year and are going to be all the better for it. But, those teams have to go out and go out into the Western Conference and play the Golden States. And it's, so there's an ebb and flow. In boxing, it's not that way. The way that you run a guy's record up is by making him fight what is referred to, since Joe Louis said it back in the 30s, as bums. Now, this is not to say that Patrick Day, the deceased Patrick Day, was a bum. It's to say that Adamus's people were confident that Day had already seen his better day and that he was not a threat because he had no power in his punch, and that their fighter could walk right through him, and that he was devastated in his previous fight. And this is what boxing does. It isn't Adamus who killed Day or Cornwell who killed Day. It's boxing that killed Day. It's the way the sport is set up. It is inhumane. It is wrong.
Would you compare today's boxing to cockfighting, like illegal dogfighting or cockfighting, or?
Yeah, I think that, it's one thing to sit there and say, I guess, and I'm looking at what Kawaki is saying, and yeah, the Russian fighter that died recently was begged to stop. And that was another tragedy that happened. Thanks, Kawaki. It happens all too often in the game. But the thing that bothers me is the sanctioning bodies know that these guys, that it's going to be a lopsided, one-sided fight. And when an up-and-coming guy is put in the ring with somebody who is too old to be in the ring, who's taken his share of beatings, this type of thing happens. And with strength training the way it is today, and I hate to think what else might be going on in the sport of boxing, people get hit harder, and I honestly believe that training is less intense than it was back in the historic days of the 30s and the 40s and the 50s, when road work and durability and endurance was huge. Now we see these big fat heavyweights getting into the ring throwing windmill punches, and they're clearly not in good aerobic condition.
Almost like human cockfighting, almost.
Yeah.
Like a fight club,
Oh, quit complaining, Rox. You want to be seen there. Now take your top off.
Mr.
Jeez.
Mr. Millett, do you think with this death and then the last two deaths that they've had, do you think this is going to change the way people are going to look at boxing?
No, because these are the same people writing about the handicap seat guy, and this is how we just kind of put things together. I mean, it's been this way since the Christians and the Lions, and this is long before the Detroit Lions. No, forget it. I don't know. The Christians would beat the Lions today, I think, because the referees would give favorable calls to the Christians because the Lions never get the calls. But that's my point, is that no, the public doesn't view it that way. They just want a good fight even if somebody dies. They want a better seat at the football game even if the crippled guy doesn't get an opportunity to get a seat. That's the days and times that we live in, and it's really a sad thing. And, hi, Toby. I wish you were able to join the panel too, but, sometimes shit just happens. That's true. The more that you, but you see, I can do this and cover Roxanne again and really just piss the Yeah, but yeah, you guys talk. I'll put your comments up.
I just wanted to ask you, Mr. Moohead. I know you said people aren't going to change the way they view boxing, but do you think upcoming boxers, it'll affect maybe the future of them, and know that if there's imminent CTE or there's imminent blow to the head, they're end up like Muhammad Ali? Do you think now with the technology and the way you can detect things faster, do you think it's going to deter people less from entering boxing like people are doing football now? Like, not many people are playing football as they used to. You know, parents are taking their kids out of Little League now because they see the long-term effects that these NFL players in the 70s are going through, you know?
Well, tell me one fighter of recent vintage who can compare to the Joe Lewis's, the Muhammad Ali's, you know.
The Mike Tysons, yeah.
Yeah, we kind of build up through Evander Holyfield and Lennox Lewis, and that's kind of where it all stops, because
90s boxing. Yeah.
once the the Russian twins, Klitschko's, and the German mob got into boxing, they were fighting the bum of the week club, finding the weakest European fighters that they could humanly find. And there was and even then Klitschko got knocked out by Lamont Brewster. I mean, Lamont Brewster, I don't even know who in the hell he was, but he knocked out Klitschko. But what it tells me is that the caliber of fights has dropped because the number of people getting involved in it are fewer. The people who are involved are economically desperate and are willing to take the crazy risks associated with it because they're largely undereducated individuals who would have menial tasks, jobs, and and economically challenged.
Yeah.
And then we have MMA, which has further drained off the audience of professional boxing, so that we have a new blood sport which satisfies the sweet tooth of those people who really want to see people get hurt. So, no, I don't think that any of this will change the perception of the game. And Max Kellerman and the people who know better, who televise these fights, because ESPN televised Day's last fight, you know damn well when you put a guy into the ring after he's taken a tremendous beating like that, you're taking a tremendous chance with a guy's life. And they don't care because, Cornwell's people and promoter wanted another W because they're building him up. And I'll tell you something else. A lot of the guys who get built up only get built up to get knocked down, because in the end, they end up fighting a really superior fighter and they get hurt.
Mr. Wood, doesn't it seem like that's what most fighters do nowadays? Like, they'll have two fighters that are both 30-0, but if you look at all their fights, it's against like scrub guys. And they just wait till the record's so big so that way they can make money. There's more money off the back end. Like, here's two guys that are 30-0, but you go back and look at their fights and like 28 of them were not even worth it. They were like amateur guys.
Yep.
You know?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that you build up people's records for a reason. Sometimes guys are overrated. I watched Meldrick Taylor become brain damaged. Meldrick Taylor was defeating Julio Cesar Chavez until the closing minutes. That stoppage was widely questioned. Meldrick Taylor was never the same fighter after taking that last-minute beating by Chavez, continued fighting, and became brain damaged. His brains became scrambled. Meldrick Taylor, you don't hear from Meldrick Taylor, and if you go on YouTube and find an interview of Meldrick Taylor when he was older, he can hardly put words together. It's a tragedy. And Meldrick Taylor was considered a pretty damn good fighter of his time, but many are called, fewer chosen. The people who are the truly gifted boxers are few and far between, and everyone else going into the ring with a lot of these guys are cannon fodder. The thing that bothers me, the era of fights that I historically got involved with, fighters fought good guys. I mean, you go back to Muhammad Ali, and if you want to, there was always a European champion who was a lesser. Brian London would be an example of a guy. Henry Cooper would be an example of a guy who fought out of the Commonwealth. These were guys who were the best in England, at the time, and Frank Bruno was one, and Mike Tyson knocked the shit out of him. The British fighters, as a rule of thumb, were or anyone else in the in the European Union, were not looked upon as being great fighters, but they always got, when you became the European heavyweight champion, that was the stepping stone to get a title shot.
I wanted to see Anthony Joshua face off against Wilder, but Anthony Joshua kept ducking and dodging him. So finally, Andy Ruiz took the challenge. Some no-name scrub guy. I mean,
and you found out exactly what that was all about, didn't you? The guy with a fucking spare tire around his gut whipped the shit out of Anthony Joshua. And I'll tell you, Deontay Wilder ain't no better. He's a wild swinging guy who's got a weak chin. And these guys are not the real deal. And they don't fight the best people because they'll be exposed. And I'll say this. Muhammad Ali fought Joe Frazier 3 times. He fought Kenny Norton 3 times. He fought Ernie Shavers, who was a devastating puncher. He at the end of his career, he fought Larry Holmes. The fact of the matter is that the good fighters of the day going back from that, Joe Louis fought Max Schmeling after Max Schmeling had knocked him out earlier in his career. Yeah. There was, you fought better guys. You fought former champions. You gave people a chance. I mean, Ingemar Johansson beat Floyd Patterson, gave Floyd Patterson a rematch, and babunga. A frightening knockout, a left hook that Floyd Patterson took Ingemar Johansson out with one single punch. The image that remains is the foot of Ingemar Johansson fluttering against the canvas as he was flat on his back. But Johansson knew he had to fight Patterson, who was the best at the time, and Sonny Liston destroyed Floyd Patterson. And Liston fought him a second time just to prove it wasn't lucky the first time. I think that's the problem in fighting today, is that the caliber is low and it's all set up. And it's really too bad.
Not only that, Mr. Moohead, but like back then, even in the 90s, like sometimes you'd have a lightweight championship match that's better than the heavyweight, or featherweight match that's just as popular as the main event match. You would have 3 fights that you can promote each month. Now in boxing, you're lucky to do 3 a year, maybe, if that.
Yeah,
now, promote a big fight, and it's not even really nothing to be excited about. Like they're doing Anthony Joshua versus Andy Ruiz too. I just looked at it on Google just now.
Well, they got to make that right. I mean,
it's Saudi Arabia, by the way.
Oh, it is.
Oh, they're gonna
Saudi Arabia.
Yeah, ship it out as far as you can go because you're gonna be able to smell it all the way over here.
Hey, Mr. Moohead, could one of those guys beat Wilder? If Anthony Joshua fought him instead of Ruiz, do you see him beating Wilder, or maybe Ruiz beating him?
Anybody who has a jab and a counter left hook will defeat Deontay Wilder. I've watched him fight a predominance of his fights, and he puts all of his weight into that right hand that he throws, but he doesn't connect with it all that often, and he leaves himself vulnerable to a counter. The thing is, the skill level is so low in the heavyweight division that nobody has that quick answer. But I guarantee you, any one of the decent fighters, and when I say, terrible Tim Witherspoon would have knocked out Deontay Wilder cold with a counter left hook. These guys knew how to do that much. And I'm not saying that Tim Witherspoon was a great fighter, but Riddick Bowe would have destroyed Deontay Wilder. Would have destroyed him.
Yeah.
The skills were just sharper. So, All right, enough of my going on and on, but it's just a mirror of the society we live in, and it's too bad. Go ahead, Jake.
I have a UFC comment to make, because last week there was a fighter by the name of Thomas Gifford, who his head coach was his father, and his wife and daughter were in the stands. And he went the whole first round and a half without really landing anything. The second half of the second round, he didn't land anything, was knocked down twice. In the intermission between the second and third round, his dad did ask him, how do you feel? It was like Terry was like, can you stand up? He's like, yes. He's like, go fight. With 15 seconds left in the fight, he was knocked down, knocked out, face first, taken off nearly on a stretcher.
Wow.
So his dad put him in that position when he did not land a significant strike in about 8 minutes of fighting.
Wow.
And it's just the culture of fighting. You can't say, I don't feel right. I can't beat this guy. I don't want to get knocked out. But the culture says, I won't quit. I'd rather get knocked out than quit.
Well,
And overall, that's not a great thing to have in any type of sport.
Well, don't they teach you that though in fundamentals? They teach you never to quit, keep going.
Exactly. Yeah. A fighter's not going to say when he's on camera on ESPN Plus or pay-per-view, are you done? Can you keep fighting? He's not going to say no. He'll never say no because Dana's listening or Bob Arum's listening.
no.
It's just the culture of the sport. You can't say no. Combat. You cannot quit in a combat sport.
So maybe his dad felt the same way about making his son go back, right?
I think it's the overall culture of the sport. It's just you can't quit. Don't quit, or you're Kovalev versus Crawford. Don't quit.
Yeah. Now OG is saying boxing's always been a sport where you're a punch away from permanent damage. Oh, it can come out of nowhere. But I'm just telling you that in the vast majority of cases that I have seen and read about and seen videos of historic fights, the guys who died in the ring very often had inordinately horrible last couple of fights and were knocked around from pillar to post. And it finally caught up with them, and it's just a difficult thing. I'm not going to say that Deontay Wilder is anything but a puncher's chance kind of guy. I don't think that he has a big skill set. I don't think any of them do. So,
Mr. Mood, not a stupid question. What do you think of Floyd Mayweather? Do you think he's a fighter? I mean, I see his fights, they're boring to me. He's all defense.
I mean, it's a different skill set, that division, too. He's a master defensive fighter.
that's right.
Guys can't hit him. He's an all-time great skilled fighter. A boring style, but you can't deny he's not a top 10 fighter all time.
And
What he has.
the thing is that it was like the late Pernell Whitaker. When these guys avoid punishment, they are not always fan favorites because their fights aren't exciting to watch because they're not slugging it out. And so I look at Floyd Mayweather as, the kind of like, Sweet Pea was back, during his career. And there have been a lot of guys like that who, then there are guys like Oscar De La Hoya, who was just a big pussy and I'm just being quite honest about it. A guy who beat up people who were in lighter weight classes than himself, fighting people who, and then when he fought anybody, and he quit. He actively quit in fights because but they got him to win enough that, he fought an old Julio Cesar Chavez, and so they could get Mexico behind him, even though Oscar De La Hoya is not really very Mexican.
No, he's not.
And any Mexican fight fan would tell you that.
Yeah.
It's just...
he's about as Mexican as Taco Bell.
Right. And, but again...
against Hector Camacho, though. I'll give him that.
If you can build up your record and not fight anybody and not be pressured to fight anybody and sit on a belt for a long period of time or end up defending your belt against lesser competition, that's how you become an Oscar De La Hoya. But De La Hoya lost to some people who, quite honestly, by the end of the fight, he stopped trying to win and was just running away to survive. And that's never really a good sign. I want to move very quickly just to a few comments about the Browns. Obviously, if you saw my editorial to Dorsey, Dorsey responded as I figured he would. They're not going to fire Freddie Kitchens in the in the bye week. They're not they're going to give him this year, and if by the end of the year this is as disappointing and a finish as it is where we're at, I say that if we don't have a better record than what we had last year, he's gone. All right, he'll be terminated. I I love Cleveland.com saying the Cleveland Browns finally need to replace Joe Thomas. You think?
Just now dawned on him?
Yeah, I mean, I really don't think that the offensive line of the Cleveland Browns just isn't very good. And I think it's affecting everything that we try to do in one way or another. The other problem is these stupid players, Demarius Randall, the Browns can still reach their goals, even the Super Bowl. And it's like, I'm tired of this Super Bowl bullshit. I mean, why don't you get into the playoffs,
How about we win your division, let alone? I mean,
yeah, I mean, all of this
on the other.
hyperbole is what got this team to where it is right now, partially, and I don't want to hear it from Demarius Randall or anyone else. Technically, yes, lightning could strike in a bottle, just like for Dorsey, who started 1-5 a few years ago in Kansas City and won his final 10 games. It can happen, but I wouldn't count on it happening.
Mainly because we don't have Andy Reid.
Yeah, well, I mean, and we don't have an offensive line. It's and if you don't believe me, look at the numbers. I mean, I wanted to share something, and these were things that we talked about going into the year. What were the weaknesses of the Browns? So we said, well, the offensive line and linebackers, right? It's what we talked about consistently before the season began. And the concern about Joe Schobert. He's our top-rated linebacker, but his PFF grade is only a 59.2. He's tackling a lot of guys, and he's playing a huge number of snaps, God only knows. He's second in the league in combined tackles and first in solo tackles. He's very athletic. However, he's second on the team in missed tackles, and this is something we talked about. He makes tackles, but he gets run over and gives up an additional X number of yards, or he flat out whiffs. 59.2 is your highest rated linebacker. Mac Wilson at a 43 doesn't really, at this point, know what he's doing out there. Darius Taylor, limited time out there. Takataki, nothing. Malik Jefferson, nothing. Willie Harvey, nothing. I mean, so we're trying to live with Joe Schobert and Mac Wilson. Good luck. Good luck. And I think part of the reason that Schobert's making so many tackles is because too many people are blocking our defensive line and too many men are being tackled by the linebacker.
That's a fascinating question, Mr. Fergus. I wish I had the answer. I think he's buried in the same hole as Higgins under the bench.
Who, Takataki?
Yep,
Yeah.
talkie. He may not be ready either. I mean, that's a tough position to learn in the NFL, too. I will say that. Middle linebacker is not something you pick up right away.
Yeah.
Usually you start outside for a year.
Couple more weeks, we're going to see him on the side of a milk carton here pretty soon.
Yeah, I wanted to put up what Kawaki said because there are fighters who are honest to God, great fighters, but they're usually the lighter divisions. And, Juan Manuel Marquez and Marcos Barrera and Marcos Antonio Barrera and Manny Pacquiao. I mean, these guys, Eric Morales. Yeah, obviously these guys were serious fighters. And I wasn't trying to demean. I was talking specifically heavyweights. In the lighter divisions, there have been talented fighters. Now back to where we were. The Browns' offensive line doesn't grade out any better, and the fact that Greg Robinson grades out highest of all of them, and that Eric Kush, who we talked about,
Higher than J.C. Treader. How can he be higher than J.C. Treader?
He is. His PFF number's higher.
I don't agree with that.
Well, granted,
I think it comes down to those. Yeah.
the numbers. The eye test, what I see in Greg Robinson is he has slow feet and he's not particularly athletic, and that's the problem that we have with him. There are other guys, Hubbard, who is just a whiff away from getting somebody killed.
Matador.
He needs an Origin Brown cape. That's what he needs. Ole!
One little berets.
Yeah, I mean, the Browns are headed nowhere right now except to New England to get the shit kicked out of them, and they'll be 2-5, and then everyone's looking forward to the rest of the week season. But what you don't realize at 2-5, and with the way officiating is going, we are one of the weak teams again.
And the offensive line. I remember you were saying that in your video earlier, your previous video. You said everybody keeps saying we have 7 or 8 winnable games, but they keep forgetting we actually have to go out there and win with this offensive line we got.
Well, Amsterdam saying there were talk about 2 new guys. Yeah, Kendall Lamb being one of them. Stephen can tell us about Kendall Lamb. There's nothing that
because he's been holding a lot. Last year, I think he led the team in holding last year.
I don't think that's what you want. And then the other guy is what's his name? They actually played him.
Kush? Eric Kush?
No. There's a guy that is new that
Teller?
Teller is the second guy who's new from Buffalo, and they're saying that he might play. And then the other guy is like McGrath or something. I don't know what his name is. Mick something, McNuggets. I don't know.
I hope it's not McLovin.
McLovin, yeah.
Or McRib, whatever.
Yeah, so, the Browns are, and if you think the Browns are bad, folks, this is one of the funniest headlines I've read.
Justin McCray.
McCray, thank you. Yeah. Cavaliers coach John Beilein learned lessons from the preseason and vows to adapt. I mean,
I forgot we hired Beeline, to be honest with you.
Yeah, he's going to make a beeline to the nearest retirement center after this season. I mean, there's nothing that John Beilein's going to do with this team. They're terrible. They're terrible. And it's another one of these coaches who's saying, I'm responsible for this, but he's not. I mean, Andrew Wiggins is still trying to figure out how to play the game of basketball because he's not really trying to get better. Nope. And Colin Sexton didn't learn how to play defense in the offseason. I'm watching the preseason games, and they're all just stopping and chucking up 25-footers. They're not moving the ball. They're not moving without the ball. They're not setting screens. They're not doing anything. And we got a whole new crew of young guys, Darius Garland, and we got, guys who are just so young and inexperienced that they don't know how to play the NBA game. And we've got a coach who came from the University of Michigan who, quite honestly, has never coached in the NBA before. You tell me, I want, seriously, Dan Gilbert, stay away from the TV because I want him to get better.
And just to think, we got to watch 82 of these games, too.
I want him to get better, and I don't want him stressing out watching this.
I'll be lucky to win 20 of them.
That's exactly right.
I'm thinking maybe about 18, if that.
17.
Maybe. Yeah. I just don't like the college coach system. Like, I understand these coaches can run a decent offense or defense scheme, but, when you're dealing with the NBA, they don't have to listen to you all the time and do exactly what you want them to do. And it's a lot of times the discipline just turns players off from listening to you at all. On
Those
the court.
Players do their own thing out there.
They'll just tune out after a while.
I mean, they're adults. Like, you're not going to be able to tell a kid to be here at 8 a.m. every day, or you're going to bench him or make him go to study hall. It doesn't work that way in the NBA.
Well, another thing that I can tell you is I've seen this before, and everybody says, "Oh, we're going to do this, we're going to do this, we're going to do this." But when you're about 15 games into the season and you're 1-14, it's all over. Nobody expects to show up to the arena and win, no matter whether you're at home or on the road. Then players start trying to build up their own numbers, and it all goes to hell in a handbasket. And then you're at the trade deadline, and you're looking at moving Kevin Love because you realize that there's nothing that you can do with the group of people that you've got. And it's not to knock on guys like Darius Garland. I mean, or Kevin Porter Jr., but they don't know how to play at this level. And when they see what it takes and they're going to get muscled around by older, more mature men, and these are young kids coming out of college after a year, they're going to wear down too. So after 30, 40 games, they're going to, it's like they're going to start pacing themselves and lose every game by 20 plus.
In other words, I'm going to get my 20 points and I'm going to get mine. That's it. Like me on Instagram.
Yeah, I mean, by the end of the season, poor Austin Carr. I mean, I mean, if you had to
risky like Bob Uecker in Major League.
Yeah, either that or he's just going to go, I'm coming to join you, Fred. I mean, it's going to be very, very difficult to watch 82 games of this.
And Mr. Muhead, when there's a lack of parity in the NBA, I mean, for years it was only the top 2 or 3 teams in the league. Whatever team LeBron was on, and maybe 2 teams from the other conference would square off, and then that was your finals. This year, you probably got about 8 teams that are in the mix, so there's a little bit more parity. But even then, you still got about 60% of the league that still you can already pretty much tell they're going to be fighting for a top 5 draft pick or a top 10 draft pick.
And I will go over this for the 100th time, all right? And with the only known example of getting players out of college and succeeding was the Oklahoma City Thunder back when they had the Troika. Okay, when they had Durant and when they had Westbrook and when they had Harden.
Yeah.
What did they win? All right, and
2 games in the finals.
and off the players went, and Oklahoma City became an afterthought, right?
Yeah, and now they got Chris Paul, who went to his original team that he got drafted by.
I mean, the Cavaliers built young players like Kyrie Irving, and they lost 50 games plus every year. They got LeBron James. They became a winner, and then they became NBA champions by adding veterans onto their roster, who then, of course, age, and then it's a very narrow window, and then the team goes back to getting young players. The point is that the young player out of college strategy doesn't work, and they're not going to win. Nobody wins that way. The Timberwolves were counting on Andrew Wiggins and Karl Anthony Towns, and where have all the flowers gone? It's a sad.
Drowned in the 1,000 lakes of Minnesota.
I feel bad for Devin Booker in Phoenix. Do you see the roster he's got?
Well, those young talented players will end up in LA or New York very soon.
Maybe, but there's no guarantee that these guys really get it. I mean, the fact is that the veterans know the work ethic, they know the conditioning, they know what they have to be prepared for. The younger players are just not getting it done.
They're part of the rebuilding process.
But they have to get better once they're in the league. And look, we can say the same thing about Giannis. I mean, Giannis, they're saying, is the best player in the NBA. The man still hasn't learned how to shoot a 3-point shot.
You can't even shoot a jump shot, an 18-footer, let alone a 3-pointer.
So, I mean, how in the hell can he be the best player in the game? And again, we don't hold these people to a very high standard, obviously. And that becomes a problem. So the young players, if they're not working their ass off, and if you don't know what working your ass off looks like, it looks a lot like LeBron James, it looks a lot like Michael Jordan, it looks a lot like Kobe Bryant, it looks a lot like Larry Bird. Guys who come into the league without certain skills that develop skills as they get older. Those are the guys. Go ahead, Steven.
Doesn't it also hurt the league if you got all these veteran players that sort of mastered how the game works and they take less money and go to 1 or 2 teams, and you leave the rookies or guys that are just 1-2 year guys on these other teams, and you already know what the outcome is going to be? That doesn't help either when they don't have veteran leadership on all these teams. They're all going to 2 or 3 teams now, it seems like. And
what coach will take a job like Cleveland? The answer is, you can't get through. David Blatt tried the hard line, and that didn't work. That got him shipped off overseas. Beeline is going to be the great teacher, and the great teacher will not be paid attention to once the losing starts. Teron Lou ends up with stomach ulcerations or whatever, and he can't take it anymore because once the veterans are old and the young players come back in, he can't coach them because they won't listen to him. And you look all around the league at the coaches getting fired and the young players remaining in the game. They have a longer lifespan than the coaches do. So, the Cavaliers got no chance. They got no chance.
Like the only way a coach will even go over there is if he's either some coach that's looking to make a come up from college to the NBA, or you're throwing the Brinks truck at him.
And I want to point out one other thing that I have prognosticated so far accurately. For all the skill and talent and hype in the world, Zion Williamson has hurt himself again.
I heard about that.
And it's always his legs. It's always his extremities. Because I'll say it again, and now that he is in New Orleans, he literally has pelican legs. The man is listed at 287 pounds. Look at his legs. Look at his legs compared to his upper body, and look at the moves that he's trying to make. He is going to have an exceedingly short career, and he is going to be so badly injured that he will never realize his potential. Because he's too heavy and he's carrying his weight too much in the upper part of his body. And 6'7", 287, that is basically what Carlos Boozer, who was at the time listed at 6'5", 280 coming out of Duke, and he got his weight down to about 250 in order to become a more mobile scoring forward. And I hate to bring up his name or Cece's name or anything with a Boozer next to it, including the guy who's getting drunk at you and making obscene gestures at your wife at the local tavern. But to make it in the league, the round mound of rebound really wasn't that round once he got going in the league. At Auburn he was, but not in the NBA.
Hey, Mr. Mued, do you think the Knicks dodged the bullet by not drafting Zion after all? Because I saw Knicks fans on YouTube already saying we might have dodged a bullet here.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's he's not in the proper condition, and he's never going to be able to play the schedule that the NBA insists of him. I mean, he's
games,
going to get hurt, and the 3 games in 4 days thing. I mean, come on,
4 games in 5 nights.
Not going to happen. I mean,
They showed like a chart of the bell curve of NBA players, and it was, or just a graph, and it was essentially a straight line up, and Zion was bottom right with his weight, where he's the heaviest guy in the league at 6'6", 6'7", and it's never matched up well. He's like Glenn Robinson, honestly.
Yeah.
How his build is, it just doesn't hold up long term.
Look, and we've already seen it with a tractor trailer. Guys who have eaten their way out, of the league. And this is a very young man at 287 pounds.
Oliver Miller, too.
Oliver Miller is another one, yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Big Miller.
Anthony
I
Bennett.
always called him all over Miller.
and
He grabs the rebound and a Big Mac from the second row.
And if you don't believe me, maybe you'll take into account some other things, and people who know me can vouch for the physical infirmities I've had because of the weight that I carried while playing tennis all of these years.
Mr. Mued, do you see the Cavs trading Kevin Love, and what are you looking to hope they'll get by All-Star break?
By the time, but they're not going to get nothing for him because they're going to be so bad. Teams are going to realize they're sellers, and they're not going to have to give up anything but more of those shitty draft picks that don't help you win. So, but if you don't believe me about Zion Williamson, then perhaps you'll take into account what happens to 39-year-olds who through their career carry too much weight. See CC Sabathia.
Yeah.
I mean, CC Sabathia, his knees went out on him, and finally, the end of his career ends up with a subluxated left shoulder, and which is all because of a lack of mechanics, because his knees are shot. And his knees are shot because he's carried an excess amount of weight through all of his career, and pitchers drive themselves with the bottom part of their body. I know this because tennis players do the same thing, and I went from being a very strong tennis player to having no ACL in my knee and having a knee replacement now. And it changes your mechanics, and because of the mechanics now, I've got back troubles. There's all kinds of things, and carrying extra weight, you know, if you're 19 years old and you're starting out that way, you know, God help you. Because if you don't get it together quick, it ain't going to happen.
Like Rafa Nadal, he played on that speed so often in his career. By the end of it, he just fell apart. And now he has that one major a year he might compete in.
Yeah, I mean, it's you know, and it's not that I want anything bad to happen to Zion Williamson. It's that I would think that the Pelicans organization, the second they drafted him, should have gotten on him, gotten him into a diet, exercise regimen, flexibility. You know, you look at LeBron James, who was a big man, all right? The one thing I regret is that I never stood next to LeBron James to just be able to admire how huge.
He's big.
He's huge. But he's doing yoga, and he can, you know, you've seen him twist ankles and keep on playing. He is so flexible because he made that effort. And if you don't do that kind of stuff and get your weight in line, and to be sure, a lot of people are saying, well, you know, when the performance drug thing got enforced in the NBA, that's when, you know, Dwight Howard said bye-bye because he couldn't play anymore. And they also noted that LeBron James, who was having severe cramping problems when he was with the Miami Heat, at the end of his tenure with the Miami Heat, also lost a good amount of weight. I can tell you this, from my experience in tennis, it isn't necessarily stuff that you're injecting. There's stuff called creatinine that people will creatine. I'm sorry, yes, and build up mass, and that will result in severe cramping. Yep. And
LeBron's also keto as well. I mean, he only eats meat too. He's also keto at the moment, so that really cut his weight.
I can tell you a person who suffered the consequences of creatine, and that was professional women's tennis player Mary Pierce. Mary Pierce literally cramped out on courts and destroyed her body by building up mass to an unrealistic level. And these things in an 82-game schedule played on a hardwood floor, it doesn't work. It just doesn't work.
And those legs wear out easily.
You bet.
60-game mark. That's why when you go to the playoffs, like half of the good players can't play because they've worn out, you know.
Well, you saw the pictures online. I'm sure we all did of Zion on the bench in the preseason. He put on at least 15, 20 pounds in just 2 months of not working out. Damn. Like, you saw him. You see that picture of him on the internet? Oh, if you look at him on the bench, he had a gut. And it was very noticeable that he was like Troy Smith level of weight gain.
Damn.
And yeah, it was bad. It was one of those, this guy definitely needs to be on like that 2,000 and under calorie diet because he can balloon up quick. He's a football body in a basketball type of environment, so it's tough for him.
Was it just me, or did the Pelicans get a shitty trade deal out of that? Josh Hart and Lonzo Ball and
well, that's the NBA. I mean, you have to take in a young talent that might not make it to get maybe some value out of your best player. I mean, the big markets will always get the better, more reliable name. It's just the NBA.
Yeah.
How it works.
I think really, you know, the thing with Zion is people want the future after LeBron James because we've all had a LeBron overdose. Let's be honest. And we love him in Cleveland, and then there are people like Brian who hate him, even though they support Trump and Putin, known communists. There are some communists that are worse than other communists. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, some commies are better than
Because
other
I
commies.
always
Some
see
are
Donald
worse.
Trump going out and licking the sack of China and their treatment of Hong Kong. I
And
always see that. I see that every fucking day, boo. Give me a fucking break.
the commies, man, I'll tell you, you're the commie destroyer, and
I am the commie destroyer.
you're the
When you
god of
have-
hellfire.
When you
And
have
I'll
$3
bring
million
you-
dollars in front of you, you'd all do it. So let's be honest here.
Yeah, I mean, the trick with Zion is they want him to be this big guy, but has the hops and agility that LeBron
They want him
James.
to be Sean Kemp, and he can't do it.
Well, and Sean Kemp could only dunk the ball, let's be honest. Sean Kemp couldn't do anything else. This guy has the ability, at least, to shoot threes and do other things. And it's all because LeBron James built the prototype. But the problem is there's only one LeBron James. And the prototype that LeBron James was wasn't the same prototype that Michael Jordan was, because he was a unique individual. Or that Larry Bird, who was slow and couldn't jump, became such a great basketball player from instincts of the game. Yeah, all these guys are individuals. You can't build a LeBron James. And I think the hype is going to, it would just be much better off for Zion Williamson to lose 30, 40 pounds and be whatever it is he's going to be and be able to do it for a long period of time than jeopardize his health this way. And but this is
going. He may not make it past 3 to 5 years.
well, right now he couldn't make it through Duke.
Yeah.
When you can't make it through a college season, we're looking at Greg Oden kind of shit. Yeah. This has a bad ending 9 out of 10 times. So, all right, I see we got 13 bonus minutes of bonus Moohead, and there's nothing better in the world than bonus Moohead.
Let's stretch it to another 5. I'm just kidding.
No, I'm done. However, I want to thank everybody for joining me, and drop a line, in the comments on the shows, whether it's in Facebook or on YouTube. Let us know what you think. We're on StreamYard right now, how the broadcast looks and sounds to you, because I'm making some determinations on how I'm going to present the program and all that. And if you've been really looking closely, you'll see that I even put a little logo up on the right-hand corner of your screen. See, I sneak these things in as I'm learning how to use this particular software, you see.
And I see Mr. Moohead is letting 6 people on the live stream because I thought it was only letting 5 in. Because once I saw Rocks in, I didn't think I was going to be able to get in, but apparently let 6 in.
Well, you did the right thing. You left a seat open for Rosa Parks, so that makes you...
Ace.
I'm being socially responsible. Thanks, everybody, for tuning into this edition of Moohead Radio. Back again, as we always are, on Monday. Of course, I'm taking the weekend off. Until Monday, hasta la vista, Pastor Heads. Good night.
Moo.
Bye.
I
Bye.